Marianne just texted and says she can't get in. So Doris, maybe, I couldn't get in originally. I had to go back to your most recent email. Did anybody else have that same experience?
Yes, I had to copy paste it. Wasn't a live link from the
All
email.
right. Okay, I'll try to
Go in
see if
and
I-
physically type in the ID and the passcode.
Yeah,
Same with me.
I don't see Marianne on yet.
So that's probably happening to her and Lily and John as well.
Are those Zoom invites usually live, Doris?
Yes, actually, I did, we're recording right now and I had trouble logging into YouTube, but my colleague just texted me and walked me through, and we are live now on YouTube. Just letting you know.
Okay. I'll be
Okay,
discreet.
thank you, Connie.
Marianne said she tried the cut and paste.
I don't think that works.
Yeah, can't do, so,
Okay, so I'm gonna resend the info to Marianne again.
oh,
Okay.
here she just says she got it.
Oh, okay,
So
good.
let's see if that's the case. And then John and Lily have it. I don't see Marianne yet, but let's see what happens. I'll reach out to Lily.
All right, John Parker and Marianne are logging in right now, and I'm admitting both. And here we go.
How about Herb?
I don't see him yet.
Herb told me that he wasn't going to be able to make it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, hi, Marianne.
Hi. That was really a struggle this time, Doris. On your agenda, that link didn't open up, and then I went to the village and it didn't open up, and then I copied and pasted and it didn't open up. Oh my gosh, and finally once it did. Oh, where are you, Will? Look, you're in a construction site.
Yes, it's called my house. Well, this is called good art, real honest architecture.
All right, we knew you were an architect. You didn't have to go to such extremes. We believed you. So is Lily here?
Lily can't get in either. So how did you, Marianne, can you maybe text Lily and tell her how you got in?
Somebody needs to turn their
All right, I'm not sure where I'm getting the.
reverb.
Hi, John.
How you doing? I'm here.
Marianne, you have your video camera on off. We just want to test it to see. There you go.
There you go.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
yeah, so I'm trying. I might have, I was using what you had in the agenda, and then I went up to the village and used their agenda. I think it was finally.
So I guess I'm not late then.
No, you're not late.
No. Can you send it to my Gmail?
Where did I-
You know, what am I sending to you? All I did was, well, I went to the village hall. to the-
Marianne?
Yes,
I'm sorry. I just sent the Zoom info again to Lily.
Lily,
I emailed it to her.
will you
To my
send,
Gmail?
will you send
Oh,
it to
here
her?
it is. Yeah,
Oh, you
I
got it? Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. I was trying to get on 10 minutes ago.
Well, I didn't start that long ago, but I had trouble. It took me like 3 or 4 times. So, and then it wanted the password, which I don't remember asking for before, but I probably have just forgotten. All right. Are you set?
Okay.
Are you set?
Let's hope. It doesn't want to. It's asking me for the password again.
Okay. The password is 169433.
Here we go.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Okay, I see Lily now.
Okay. Okay, so are we set?
I believe we have a full,
Hello?
yes, full board.
Yeah.
I don't think Herb is going to be here tonight.
I don't see her.
He's not going to, he told me he might not be here.
I'm sorry, who's that?
Herb.
Oh yeah, Herb told me that he wasn't going to be here. So are we ready? Can we start with the Pledge of Allegiance, Doris?
Yes, I'm going to share their screen. Give me 1 second.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag.
of the United States of America and to the
To the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this is, what is this? December 3rd, 2020. It's a meeting of the Harbor Committee. We have in attendance Lily Phil, John Parker, Will Sharp, Herb Sample is absent. We have Chick Voorhees, Eileen Keenan, and Fred Thiel in attendance as well.
Well, we're sending these, Vicky's gonna.
Alternate is here.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Tom is here. There's your picture. I was reading across the top. Your picture wasn't there. All right, now I see you. Okay. And Kate Plum is here. So the minutes, oh, Lily, where are you? You're in Wyoming, calling in from Wyoming.
This was in Darby, Montana.
Well, it's very nice. So minutes, I saw your note that we don't have the November 5th minutes yet. Did we do October, Doris? I thought maybe we didn't do October yet.
Right. I have to check my notes. I thought we did, but we can put both over to the next meeting.
Okay, all right. So can I get a motion to table the approval of the minutes until the January meeting?
Actually, we do have a draft of the November minutes.
Right, but I need to edit with the changes, John.
Okay, well, I just want to say, at the last meeting, you asked me to try to help go over the minutes, and at
Right.
kind of the last minute, because of Thanksgiving, I was trying to do this with Doris, and I couldn't find the October minutes, so I don't think we've done those. But she did send out, she saw a draft of the November minutes, and I went over those, and I suggested some changes to her, which she didn't get until this morning.
Correct.
So, but I do have one question about that, which maybe you can help me with if anybody's looked at the minutes. And that's in regards to, just give me a second here. At 12 Green Street, because, and you had, I believe, Marianne, you had emailed back and forth about this, about 12 Green Street, as to what as to whether we were waiting for the zoning board. Do I have this correct?
No, you do not. I don't
Okay.
believe you do. No. Let's just take
Oh,
that
we can-
offline. We can take that offline and polish up the minutes.
Okay, that's fine. I was just
Okay.
trying to get as much of it done as we could.
Right, okay, let's take it offline because the whole thing won't be done until next year, all right? Okay, so the next item I have down is a discussion item of the,
I'm sorry, Marianne, there was a motion, I don't have a motion or a second to table
Oh,
the
you're right.
minutes. Right.
okay, can I have a motion to table the approval of the minutes until the January meeting?
I'll make
I'll
that
make-
motion.
Thank you. Second,
I'll second.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
And for the record, the next meeting is January 7th, 2021.
okay. All right. So now we have a discussion item, but I'm not sure we have anybody here to discuss. I kind of lost the thread with Denise. I'd asked her to give us her report on 36 Fordham Road. There was a great article in the Express. Part of my reason for putting it on the agenda was I wanted to make sure that the newspaper heard it, saw it, advertised that result. But they had, on the basis of Denise, I think, sending him a press release. But Denise isn't on the call, is she?
No, she's not. I don't see her, Marianne.
Okay, so there's actually one outstanding part of that suit where the plaintiff had also asked the court to demolish, eradicate, declare invalid all of the wetlands law. So chapter 285. So that is still outstanding. So she had some hesitation about discussing any of it until it was all done. So anyway, moving on. We're not going to have that discussion item. We can.
Mary Ann, could you forward a copy of that decision? I saw that you were sent a copy of the decision.
I will do that.
Okay, thank you.
I'll send it to everybody.
I
Thank you.
think I think the point is that apparently the court found that our decision was valid, was not arbitrary, capricious,
Et cetera. Exactly. So is there anybody from the public that would like to bring up any topic at all?
I don't see, I'm going to check the participants list right now. I do not see any hands yet. No hands, Marianne.
Okay. So then we can move right along to decisions. We can, the first thing on our agenda is 11 Terry Holdings. The public hearing has been closed on this, correct, Doris?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And, oh, Chick, you're here.
Yes,
So-
hi, Marianne. Hello, everyone.
Good. So do you want to sort of briefly describe this? Because we had asked you to draw up a permit, right? To draft a permit?
That's correct. Yes, this has had a long history, but we did succeed in having a project that conforms to setbacks and meets the requirements for a permit under Chapter 285. And you had directed me at the November meeting to prepare a decision. My associate Eileen Keenan is here with me because I may have to leave a little early and I may even be able to come back depending on how long the meeting runs. But for the purpose of this decision, it was circulated to the board members. It includes a project setting and description, findings as to why and how the application, the plan, and the overall project conform to the provisions of Chapter 285, specifically 285-9. It's a type 2 action under seeker. It's consistent with the LWRP. And we have conditions of approval with reference to the latest project plans. So this, as I said, did meet with the committee's approval at the last meeting, and this is the formal decision that you asked me to draft. It is before you tonight if there's any questions.
Okay. Anybody on the committee have any questions of Chick or Eileen? Okay, so can I have a motion to accept this draft decision? Oh, I'm not on mute. I thought maybe I was on mute because
No,
I got silence back.
your camera was off, Marianne.
Well, my camera was off, but everybody could hear me.
Yes,
Can I have a motion to approve this decision as written?
I'll move.
so we have a mover, John Parker.
Oh, did you move? Okay. Second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So how many ayes did we get? We had John Parker, Kate Plum, Marianne Eddy. I didn't hear any discussion on the part of the Harbor Committee. Are there people that have issues here that they'd like to discuss that aren't voting? Okay, well, I guess it passes with those three. Is that correct, Doris?
Correct.
Okay,
I thought Lily seconded it.
Wait, I'm asking Lily to unmute. Lily?
Yes, I seconded it.
Yes, I do have you as a second. Correct.
and did you vote on the motion?
I did with the
You were, I
yes.
think, muted.
Yes.
That's what I
Okay.
thought. Yeah, good.
Is-
So
will
Doris-
Chantel-
Doris has the document and it's ready for signature. And thank you very much.
And Will, can we record what your vote is on this?
Can I just abstain?
You can abstain. I'm sure you can. That's legal, right, Fred?
You can abstain.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
All right. So now the next item on the agenda is 62 West Water Street, but we got a notice, I don't know, an email, later this afternoon
Correct.
from the designer asking us to table this until January. So,
Correct.
Can I have a motion to table this until January, please?
I'll make a motion to table it.
Thank you. A second, please.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
All right, so that's tabled until January.
January 7th is the next meeting. Yes.
Okay. The next item is 314 Main Street. Check, now I understand that from our last communication that you were waiting for some items that you hadn't received yet and that we were going to have to table this. Is that correct?
Well, first, just by way of background, the committee did ask me to prepare a permit.
Right.
And it was subject to working out a couple of consistency items that I had identified at the November meeting. So we've worked closely with Dennis, Cliff, and Paris, and all parties involved to look to try and get the material. As recently as yesterday, I sent an email just clarifying exactly what was still needed. So we are ready to, prepare this permit as soon as the materials are received. I can say that we do have a satisfactory landscape plan based on our prior discussions and with the removal of Rugosa rose with the substitute of a native species. And there's just a few things on a survey. I will note that Clifton sent in a survey probably a half an hour ago. So we don't have everything reviewed. We do have a deadline for the meeting. We've been looking to try and expedite and really work closely with the applicant to get the materials. And we will continue to do that, but I do not have a permit prepared at this time.
Okay.
Chick, can I ask a question? What did they swap the Rugosa with?
Let me get to that file. Unless Eileen beats me to it. Give me 1 second. Or if the applicant is here and can comment on that, that would be fine as well.
I think
Is it bayberry or switchgrass, it says, or
Yeah, it's
peach plum?
beach. Yeah, exactly.
I
Oh,
thought it
great.
was Beach Plum and I wanted to check.
Oh, beach plum is super. Good for you.
I saw some very healthy beach plum that was planted on a project of mine in the Pine Barrens today, and it certainly is hardy.
And they can make jam afterwards.
Okay,
So Chick, just so we're sure, you've had a chance to look at the landscape plan and that meets with your approval.
Yes, we felt that that was adequate. It had been before with the provision for that substitution. And I think I received the final plan on Monday and commented back to the applicant that it was satisfactory. So that we can reflect in the permit that will include the other plans once we get those final revisions and the revision dates.
And there was supposed to be revisions on a survey. And we had discussed at the last meeting what those revisions were. And we've received a survey, but there's been no time to review it to see if it is correct in accordance with our discussions.
That's correct. It looks like it came in at 3:41 this afternoon. Was it? It did also.
Yes,
go-
that's Clifton Murdoch. Yes, that's correct. It was sent at 3:40 PM and you probably received it at 3:41 PM.
Yes. So thank you for that. As I said, we really appreciate you working hard on this. And as soon as we get everything ready, I don't expect any issues. So unfortunately, we will have to get it in shape for the January meeting. But we'll be looking at everything right away.
Thank you.
So,
Understood.
So, Chick, can the committee request that you draft up a decisions for?
I think we did that at the last meeting. We were just waiting for the information. So I don't think the board needs to take any further action. As soon as the information's all in, and I guess it is now, and he has a chance to review it, we should have a permit ready for you to actually vote on in January. So you don't need to do anything further because you already had directed Chick to do that.
Are you sure?
Yep.
That's my understanding as well, Marianne.
Okay, I'm looking at your crib sheet that you sent me. I didn't see that on there, so, okay.
I know that it was on the memo, and
Okay.
I remember distinctly, I remember adding that it was subject to getting this in order.
Okay. I'm
It's
happy.
also in the draft minutes.
Okay, so that goes to January. So can I, Doris, so I need to make a motion. We're going to table this to January, or will it just automatically roll over?
Yes, we need a motion to table it, correct?
Can we have a motion to table this until January, please?
I make the motion. Okay.
I'll
Thank-
second.
Okay, and all in favor? Aye.
Sorry, who made the motion?
Okay, so I did.
Kate?
Well, I can't-
Sorry, am
Well-
I the only one whose audio is being completely distorted?
Eileen? I'm sorry.
Right. The audio is, everyone that's speaking is being distorted right now? Maybe I
Yours
need to,
is distorted.
Is your iPhone near the iPad?
I'm connected through my computer. Maybe I should call in instead?
No, move your phone away from your computer is what she's suggesting.
And your landline, if you have that.
Eileen?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
We hear you, but yes, you have like a, hello?
A vibration? I'll reconnect.
Okay.
Okay. We've passed a motion to table, oh no, I'm sorry, we're now at 59 John Street.
Correct, Marianne.
So this is a continued public hearing.
That is correct. And for the record, Susanna Herman also requests to table this item to the January 7th meeting.
Correct. Can we have a motion to table this until January 7th, please?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
I,
Okay. So now we have the last of the public hearings, continued open public hearings is 12 Green Street. Is there somebody here to speak to this application?
Good evening, members of the board. Brian DeCessa, attorney for the applicant. Along with me this evening is Mickey Benson and Michael Geller from GP Schaefer, Ed Hollander, landscape architect, and Dana Cuneo from B. Lang Associates, environmental planners and consultants. We were last here last month, and the board had addressed some specific questions for us to look into and to review. Some of those we reduced to writing, as well as updated landscape plans. In addition to that, we did appear before the Architectural Review Board, and the project that you see before you this evening was approved at the conclusion of the previous Architectural Review Board meeting. We notably, let me pull up, if I get screen share, please, Doris.
Of course. We have 1 minute and now.
Sure.
Okay.
In addition to that, there was also, can you guys see the survey on the screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. So in addition to that, there was also a site visit made by Mr. Voorhees, Dana, and Ed, again, to the site. What I show before you, one of the questions, or the first question that I'll discuss, was the board had asked if there was a possibility of further moving the house in an eastern direction, which would be over here. Two reasons that this is the maximum move that we can do of the part of the house. One, the Architectural Review Board, in terms of streetscape, determined through their decision, this was the farthest we could go to the east on the property, as well as in re-reviewing the low nitrogen IA septic system, we have the minimum setbacks. We have a 10-foot to structure. We have 5 foot to the property lines. So this area, it meets the minimum criteria in terms of setbacks to the property line and to the structure. So the shifting, which was started over here and moving this block of the house in an eastward direction, was the farthest that we could move that. As a mitigating factor to that, we were able to add, so we did an analysis to close out that point on if the house were to be shifted, which we can't do, what would it do for the buffer area? That buffer, if it were to be shifted to 7 feet, the buffer would be able to, which we would be discussing this area here in the 50-foot buffer. So it's this area here. If we were able to shift farther, we could move this further out. This area equates to 70 square feet of potential additional buffer area. What Mr. Hollander's office was able to do was to push this buffer line back further to where we have these proposals, which equated to a net increase in the buffer of 180 square feet. So we now have a buffer that exceeds the requirement of this board as an additional consideration. Are there any questions with respect to that?
No, thank you for that.
Great. In addition to that, we did also, I'm just going through my checklist, there was a question as to, this is the revised dock plan that you received and Mr. Voorhees reviewed. There was a question as to whether or not there were stairs. The previous diagram appeared to indicate, or there was the perception that there could have been stairs here. There are not. This goes into the grade here. So we revised the dock plan to clearly depict what the conditions were there, which was also on the board's list.
Dennis, I'm sorry, Brian, why don't you, if you can go down to the next diagram, which is the cross section.
I don't have that up.
Okay.
Dan, are you in front of your computer? One moment.
Yeah, it did show exactly.
I am, but I don't have the plan with me, but basically the second sheet was a cross section that showed the access to the dock was more of a ramp structure rather than stairs.
Right.
So we modified the plan view to reflect what the cross-section looked like.
Just for
Help to
consistency.
visualize, but if it's not handy, that's fine.
This area also identified where for construction purposes. And then the other question was an interpretation and response to ecologically what exists on the property. Specifically, these are shots of the property. So that ramp leads from here, from that cross section as to where that would come off of. And then I believe you had asked Mr. Voorhees to inspect the site first. So if you want to go first, Chick, and then I can respond.
Sure. Is that okay, Marianne?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the applicant had submitted a document that was looking to have a determination made that there's not a bluff on the site. That went to the building inspector, who shared it with me, and I met the applicant at the site with Ed Hollander and Dana Cuneo a week or so ago. And came back and deliberated with Tom Priato. And Tom prepared a letter dated earlier this week, I think it was December 1st, finding that it did meet the definition for a bluff under Chapter 285.
Can you repeat that?
That the site did meet the definition of a bluff along the shoreline, shoreward of the wetlands. And that letter was sent to the applicant as a determination of the building inspector. So that would activate certain provisions of Chapter 285 that setbacks, as well as standards for review of projects with respect to a bluff. And the applicant has submitted a response to that, but it came in kind of late. It hasn't been thoroughly reviewed. And Brian may wish to indicate the nature of that correspondence.
Sure, and just in terms of the timing, we received the village's letter on the 1st and we responded within 24 hours on the 2nd. So I know the board's policy is to have applications and submissions filed the Friday before. However, it wasn't possible based on the search circumstances. So I think what we're dealing with here, and in sum and substance, ecologically, when you research what a bluff is and how it's created, those conditions do not exist on this property. Under a definitional standpoint, the definition under 285 requires a bank or a cliff as a precursor to a finding of a bluff. There are other factors, but I'm starting with that factor. Banks and cliffs are not defined in the code, and the definition of a banks or cliff are not, there's no definition of that in Chapter 285 of the code. And the definition of bluff is overly broad in the sense that it doesn't give specifics as to how that determination is to be made. Now, that being said, I think ecologically, a cliff is something, and we have an example of that in our photo, or bluff rather, as to it's moved, it's created by waterways, it's subject to shifting. Your LWRP did an analysis of that and found bluffs exist on the eastern edge of the village. For instance, on Terry Drive, you have bluffs that shift with sand, that shift with weather and relations to that. The LWRP made a finding in Upper Sag Harbor Cove that this area had gentle wooded slopes. Part of our position is that subsequent to the previous construction when this house was built, that fill from the property was then pushed in a seaward direction to the edge to create the existing land and topography condition that you have there today. Under either way, the proposed house is the farthest that it can be shifted away from the slope or topographic feature, specifically this grassed, wooded, and treed area. So going back to our survey, the area that is being discussed is seaward somewhere of the 10-foot contour line. There hasn't been a finding as to a location on this property, but I believe, Chick, you would agree, and everyone would agree, that we're discussing the area that is seaward of the 10-foot contour. And this is the 10-foot contour. So
Yes, I would agree with that.
and I'm trying not to put words in your mouth. I just think that's the area, just the best to find it for the board. So either way, where this 10-foot contour runs the width of the property in a north-south direction, the proposed improvements are far to the east as they practically can be located. I know.
And if I can interrupt you just for a second, I just want to be clear. You're agreeing with Tom Praiato that there's no bluff. Is that correct?
I'm not agreeing to that, but I'm
Tom's
saying
determination was that there was a bluff, John.
That there was a bluff?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I misheard that then. Tom's determination is that there is a bluff.
under the definition, under the chapter 285 definition, that was his finding.
Right.
And my position is that regardless of finding, we can have a discussion about that. The proposed project does everything it can to be as far away from this area as possible, and currently sits closer to that. So the proposal is to move further away from that, which would be a benefit to this area. The area is also, as you saw, if you visited the site and or from the photos, is heavily planted. So it's got substantial trees growing out of it. It's got substantial ground cover on it. Ed, can you speak to that, please?
I think I went out there with Chick and with Dana, and we kind of looked at this. You know, I want to call Tom and apologize to him for asking him to make a determination that you really need a geologist or a geographer to make, but he got kind of put in this position because the code says a 2-foot slope is a bluff, and it definitely is a 2-foot slope. I think it's important, though, that we kind of let science be our guide as we look at this, because bluffs, when we talk about bluffs and why we need to have setbacks from them, as we see, let's say in North Haven along Robertson Drive or up on the bluff, bluffs are erosional geographic areas, and we need to keep our structures away from them because they're going to erode, and we don't want things to fall into the water. You know, a wetland is an incredibly valuable ecological area, and so the setbacks from that are to protect the wetlands. The reason why we have bluff setbacks where we have bluffs isn't to protect the bluff, it's to protect the structure from the bluff eroding. And the one thing we noticed when I was out there with Chick and with Dana is clearly there are no erosional forces going on here that would have created this bluff. That this slope, if you will, of this bluff was created by the placement of fill when they when they built this and leveled this area off. There's fill that was placed that's level, and then the ground slopes away. So this is not an erosional bluff that structures are in danger when they're close to it. It's a bluff that was created by man when fill was pushed up to flatten out this site when the house was built, and there's now a slope down to the water. One of the ways we see that it's not an erosional bluff is by the density of vegetation that's on here that we all noticed. I mean, down at the bottom, there's Phragmites and native Baccharis, and then the bluff here with all the grasses on it is where we're going to do a native restoration. But the fact that we have trees that are 40 or 50 years old growing out of this slope, I don't know how that kind of, that's kind of the arboricultural proof is in the pudding, if you will, that this is not a, that the interface with Sag Cove is not eroding in any way. And therefore, while it may technically meet the wording of the code that it is a bluff, it's not eroding in any way the way we would typically see in other areas where you would have setbacks from that bluff.
It's Kate Plum. Is it my understanding that you were going to take down that tree, though, that was on that bluff?
We were there. There are the native. There's an ailanthus tree in there, which is creating a lot of invasive, ailanthus seed like crazy. And so we're starting to get an invasion of non-native ailanthus trees. So we were going to actually cut that tree down and replace it with natives. That's on the planting plan.
Right. And just one other thing, the whole point of moving the structure 8 feet eastward, is that right? Yeah,
Correct.
is to try to get it more in compliance with the boundaries. But the whole point is because the extension of the house is, you want a certain extension in the house, and so therefore that prevents you from actually moving even more eastward. Is that correct? I'm new at this, so I just.
No, if I could, Ms. Plum. So 2 parts to your question. Yes, the intent moving the house eastward was to establish a 50-foot non-fertilization, non-disturbance zone from the edge of wetlands. Currently, the house sits inside of that
43 feet or
that
something.
amount.
Yeah, or whatever, yeah.
Correct. The addition being off the back of the house would still be farther because it's not on the eastern side of the house.
Right.
Would still be outside of that 50-foot area.
But not 75 feet where structures should be.
Right.
No, but the whole site, if you did 75 feet, you wouldn't be able to develop that site today.
There wouldn't be.
Right.
So
Right. That that kind of goes to a couple of questions I have. I'm looking at the survey and it goes proposed gravel area. Can you tell me what that is?
Off
This
the
area
end of the
here?
house there?
Yeah.
It's just a seating area with some gravel so they can have some chairs to look out over the water.
Okay. And directly down below that, I hadn't even noticed this because it's so light, but there's actually the footprint of the original house there under the colored version of that survey. And I can see in very light print, it says existing house to be removed. So the house is to be removed and they are building this proposed house. Is that correct?
that is incorrect. The house is being moved. A wing of the house is to be reconstructed. The eastern wing of the house, which is the sunroom, is to be reconstructed in a more historic setting per what we discussed with the Architectural Review Board. And that is because that was a later addition to the house based on a finding as to what's in the Sag Harbor Village record and an investigation by the village historian who consults with the Architectural Review Board. So the main section of the house is being moved. The wing is being rebuilt in like kind with a more appropriate roof and otherwise.
So if I'm looking at this diagram where there's the very faint footprint underneath it, and it goes the two-story house, right? You can't really see it on this diagram. It's so faint. But I don't quite understand where the house is being moved. What direction is the original house being moved?
The original house, which is this gray line that the mouse is on, is where the house currently sits.
That's the additional sunroom, correct?
That's the sunroom that exists today, correct?
Right. So, but as I'm seeing it, it looks like the facade of the original house, it's outside of the yellow area.
This is these are front, this is the front covered porch that sits out here. That is being removed to just see the front facade of the house.
And can I ask something also? Where the house, where you see that faint gray line?
This one?
Go up there, that corner right there. Yes, that. Does that, where is the existing patio? There's a brick patio that's there right now.
It's behind it in this area.
Okay, because when you walk off that brick patio, that's 17 feet before you begin your bluff, your slope.
So I would agree with you on that. And the new proposal to the area that you're discussing becomes 32 feet to that sloped area from the corner of from this corner to where the area that you just described, Ms. Bell, becomes 32 feet.
Right. So Chick, I'm very uncomfortable with this vis-a-vis chapter 285 and what we have, I think, nearly universally observed is a 75-foot setback from wetlands. So is that something that we can ask this applicant to come back with something that shows a 75-foot setback? I mean, yes, we have a swimming pool, but not every house needs a swimming pool. I can see where they would like to modernize that house and have something that's more comfortable, but they're putting in a 6-bedroom house there. I don't know, along with the proposed pool, we need a house that big.
So it's
And
not actually 6 bedrooms, that's for purposes of the health department, but I can have the architect speak to that.
well, okay, but it's
But,
essentially
yeah.
the same amount of square footage
It
that would
is.
afford a 6-bedroom house, right?
That is correct.
So I would just like my consultant, or maybe my attorney here, to advise me on this issue because I'm very uncomfortable.
One of the things that's unfortunate in these drawings, which are remarkable, but they also don't give a good graphic of the existing and the proposed. On the other drawing, Mr. DeSessa, if you could flip it back to the other drawing, as Mary Ann mentioned, there's a faint, it would be really great if the existing footprint was a different color.
Yeah, so you have a set of those plans, Mr. Sharp. They were submitted by Mr. Hollander's office. I just couldn't pull them up on here, but Justin, perhaps you could pull them up if he's on.
I think Justin's on.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Maybe while that's coming up, Mary Ann, if you want me to make a couple of remarks based on your question.
Yes, please.
So the committee uses chapter 285 for weighing and determining if a project meets the standards for issuing a permit. Specifically, those standards are in 285-9. And if there's a project that does not meet the setbacks, in other words, the 75-foot for a structure, there's the sanitary setback and the 50-foot buffer, then other provisions do get weighed in, and those are under 285-9D. You are familiar with them. We have exercised them before. And in this case, the applicant did submit a document that describes their position with respect to those. So we should definitely review those carefully. And that would pertain to the wetlands portion of the permit. The separate issue is really a twofold matter, and that is the issue of the bluff. So the building inspector has determined that a bluff exists, and Ed Hollander's input before basically agrees with that it is a slope that is greater than 2 feet. And all of the testimony that Ed provided was very useful, but it actually goes toward the standards for a bluff. And those are in 285-9E, which outline the setback under 1, but then indicate basically those environmental factors, those ecological factors, geologic in terms of erosion, those factors that Ed spoke to before. So I would say that if a bluff is present, which I believe it is based on the building inspector's determination as well as the definition, the applicant does need to address these items in 285-9E so that you have the full input with respect to the ecological and geologic factors that need to be weighed. So that's really the overview of how this should be reviewed. And certainly the applicant is taking the position that the house can't be moved farther back, but that's what the board has to determine through the weighing and the reviewing of the factors under 285-9D as well as E.
Yeah, just to jump in also, just to kind of confirm what Chick is saying is, with regard to the wetlands, the 50-foot buffer, 75-foot for structures, 100-foot for sanitary. The code says, those are the standards to the maximum extent practicable. And you have one set of standards that have to be evaluated that are in the code in 285-9, where the setbacks are met. And those are obviously much easier cases. Where the setbacks for wetlands are not practicable, as Chick said, there are additional standards which you have to consider. And to be able to approve reduced standards, reduced setbacks, the applicant has to meet those standards. So, Marianne, looking at this, that's what you have to look at. It's what's in the statute. What is it that the applicant has to prove for not meeting the standards? And in your opinion, do they meet those standards based on what they present? And then, as Chick said also, there's the issue with regard to the bluff. That's a decision, the same definition is in the wetlands law that's in the zoning code. That's the village's definition of a bluff. The official that gets to make that determination is the building inspector. He's made that determination that it's a bluff. So that also triggers the provisions in the statute with regard to a bluff setback. With all of these setbacks, as we said, it's maximum extent practicable. This board has the authority to approve lesser setbacks, but again, those standards have to be met. So, assuming for the moment, well, not assuming, the building inspector has ruled in this regard. And I think, the issues that were raised by Ed Hollander, are evidence to be presented to the board as to, whether or not a lesser setback can be accommodated here. So, the burden of proof is on the applicant because the setbacks aren't being met. And they get to make their case, and you get to apply the standards and determine whether or not they are entitled to the relief they're seeking based on that evidence.
Also, Marianne, just to kind of help the applicant in structuring their submission, we did prepare a memo, which Brian, you can find in the file or get from Doris, or I'd be happy to send it to you. And it outlines
I'm sorry, when was that from?
Excuse me?
When was it from?
It was dated yesterday.
Oh, I did not see that.
Right. And so it's really more to guide the board because, as I said, I thought that I would not be able to attend the whole meeting. So far I'm hanging in there. But you may want to take a look at that and I'd be happy to send it to you. That may help.
That would be helpful.
And Chick, in response to the points that you and Fred made, which I think really go to the crux of the matter here, which is how do we make this project as good as it can possibly be for the village? And obviously that's something that means a lot to me, with everything we've done in the village down in Long Wharf and the park and everything else. And the fact that I live about a block away from this, it means a lot to me that we make every project, particularly ones on the water, as good as they can be for everybody, not just the applicant. And I think one of the things that we've done here, which I think is admirable and which Mr. Harris was happy to do, was not only to agree to revegetate and spend the time and the money to revegetate the wetland, the bluff, and the upper area, but to reach out into the Green Street area and the common area, because it would ecologically benefit all of Sag Harbor Cove to get the Phragmites out of there. Moving the house back. So I think if the burden of proof on the applicant is, as Fred said, how do we make this as good a project as it practicably can be within the fact that somebody built a house closer to there than they should have, you know, before the rules were in place. I'd like to give the client some credit in this because he's been very open to everything we've suggested about restoring the wetland buffer, restoring the slopes, doing everything he can do to make this project as ecologically appropriate as he can, which was really my concern. The architects were in front of the ARB, and I think the ARB was very happy with what they've done architecturally and for the village that way. But I think that the applicant has also ecologically, thank you, my wife is just showing me carrots she brought home from Schiavone's, that the applicant has really gone out and has done everything he can do within the confines of the lot to make as many ecological improvements as he possibly can do.
I've got a question here, either for Fred or Chick or possibly both. I mean, this isn't a new house. This is an existing house. And I look at it a little differently when you have an existing structure as opposed to building a new structure. And I don't know whether that fits in completely with the code. Then Fred, you can comment on that. But it seems to me this is possibly an improvement over the current status. It's being moved back. And Chick, you can comment on this. I mean, in some cases, I'm not sure what we gain by adding a few feet of a buffer, depending upon what the topography is of the particular area.
John, I don't think it's a question of the buffer so much. I think it's a question of the setback.
Wetland setback.
The setback is there for a purpose. And again, this is an existing house that doesn't meet the setback. It would be different if they were building a new house. You have an existing buffer. You have to some extent you have an existing setback. They're moving it back, and there's been discussion as to whether it could be moved farther. Now, another question I have is there were emails that were sent and from you, Mary Ann, and from others talking about returning to the ZBA about an altered location. And I'm just trying to clarify that because we saw those emails as to whether the ZBA would allow it to be moved. And so I'm not sure what the facts are as to that.
I can answer that. So the ZBA came back through Carrie at the Village Hall saying that the ZBA, I don't remember the exact language, but it was negative. And I didn't challenge that.
I'm sorry, negative in what? They wouldn't allow it to be moved?
They wouldn't allow it, but it's like, I'm not sure that their, setbacks trump our setbacks. So I just let sleeping dogs lie for the moment until we had the whole application in front of us and we were looking at all the different aspects that were relevant to the question.
Can I ask a question? What is the existing square footage?
It's slightly less than 1,600 square feet.
And what's the proposed?
Almost 3,000.
So Fred, does this not constitute new construction?
Yeah.
Well, obviously they're adding to the house. I think, it's a larger house, obviously. These are all factors for you to consider. Mm-hmm. The factor that John Parker mentioned about the fact that, there's an existing house there and it's being moved back. That's a factor to consider. The increase in the overall size of the house. These are all factors for you to consider. It's a balancing test. I think, you balance all of those things and, you determine whether or not, basically these standards are a balancing test and you determine, what you think is important under these standards and, whether, to use, John's phraseology, which is it better, after it's all done with regard to the factors that we are concerned about as far as protecting wetlands and protecting bluffs, is at the end of the day, is the situation on the lot better for those resources than it is now, I think is certainly
Well, Fred,
something that's relevant.
I think that ends up being a really rocky path because I think it's hard for us to imagine, and we've been in this situation before where a pool is 74 feet back from the wetlands, and we made them move it to 75. And they did that cheerfully. Because it's hard to know what the difference is between 75 and 74, but then you go from 75 to 70 to 65 to 63. And, you know, where is the science? I don't think that there's hard determinations as to what's better for Sag Harbor Village in terms of footage. I think all we have to rely on is what the great minds that put together, you know, Chapter 285 has deemed to be appropriate and in the best interest of the village. So I get uneasy when we're talking about, well, it's a little like this, it's a little like that. One question I have, because John, you bring up the idea of the existing house. There's part of the existing house that I believe is going to be propped up and moved and then incorporated or encapsulated in this new construction. But there's part of it which was an originally added on sunroom that's going to be totally demolished. I think, is that not true, Brian?
That the sunroom is going to be rebuilt if that in its entirety.
Right. Okay. So that is, as we try to sift through all this and think of what the variables are, that is in a slightly different situation in my mind than that old farmhouse. That's, how old is that? Like 150 years old?
It was actually built somewhere else and moved to the site, so some of that is unclear.
Okay. But it's a very old house.
It is, and that's why we're preserving it. And I think, just to answer some of your points, it's a totality of the application. You know, if this was a vacant lot, or if this was a deeper lot. So in your example, Marianne, where you said that, you know, someone proposed a pool at 74 and they had the ability to move it to 75. If we had the ability to move stuff to 75, we would do that. But for the lot doesn't allow for that. And the lot is already constructed. So what we have to do when we look at the improvement of the lot is how can we make it the best based on the size of the lot and the existing conditions. So 75 feet here is on the eastern side of where the house is proposed to wind up. Just as a reference when you look at the plans. So
I have a hard time visualizing that.
I'm seeing that the 75 goes roughly through the house, Brian.
It goes kind of to the middle of the house, doesn't it?
Right.
So if you look at where the septic system is, because it arches, the edge of the septic is 105.
Can you point that out on your diagram? Because I'm not seeing that.
Sure. So this line here, hold on, this is 105.
Okay.
So 75 puts you somewhere, this is 50, right?
Right.
So you're somewhere here.
Brian, the landscape plan does have all three setbacks, 50, 75, and 100. There you go.
Okay.
So that's what Mary and Ann and I were commenting, that it looks like the 75 goes roughly through the house.
Middle of the house, right. Brian, you had mentioned that you have a diagram, and I didn't find it. I've been really working off of this one that we have here with the yellow footprint, that it shows in a contrasting color the original footprint.
I do. I don't have that for digital presentation. We submitted that to the village,
Right,
but I can.
if Doris can allow Justin from my office to share screen, I think he might be able to put that up.
Right.
Justin.
Willard.
Oh, I see him. Okay, hold on.
I hope he's there to put it up now, but I think we are.
Okay, Justin. I'm gonna ask Justin.
There we are.
There we go. Okay.
Justin, you're muted, but I think they're.
Brian, one of the
Yeah,
comments
something
in the
with
memo-
many different colors.
Yeah, one of the comments in our memo was to provide a clear diagram that shows both footprints. because it was very difficult to sort that out.
Right, that's the, Justin's with the hand now is showing that footprint right now. Justin, go to the seaward side so we can see how far back the house has moved here. Where the old, so show the old
It's-
footprint.
You could see it better on the printed versions that we're submitting.
Right, that's the old
digital
footprint
versions.
there.
But we can do that, Chick,
Yeah,
if that
you
was in your
put a
memo.
colored line on it.
That's easy.
I think it would help. Of course, yeah, it's just an exercise, but we're all having trouble visualizing that. So thank you.
All right, so where are we, Chick? Can you summarize what we're asking the applicant to do at this point?
We want to make sure that we have all of the information that the applicant wants to present with respect to 285-9D, and that's the wetland setback. We would like the location of the bluff plotted on the plan and the applicable setbacks. And we would like the applicant to address the provisions of 285-9E with respect to the environmental conditions of the bluff. I will just say a couple of things that, I think the board should be focused on. Can the house be moved farther from the wetlands, which that question has been asked and I guess answered, but I think it's still a challenge for the applicant. And I will say that there are a number of things that are beneficial here. It's a very extensive landscape restoration plan. If you look at the landscape plan, it actually talks about lawn restoration, and the removal of lawn, particularly if it's fertilized, is a quantifiable benefit that reduces nitrogen and establishes natural habitat and provides for dissipation of stormwater and provides better protection of wetlands. So you don't have that buffer now, but they are proposing that 50-foot buffer with the extended area to offset the flagstone that goes into the buffer. So that's, that is certainly a benefit, and moving the house farther back is a benefit. And I should know, but Brian can confirm that we have an IA system proposed because
That is correct.
so that's a benefit as well. So those are some of the things that I think would be weighed in your deliberations, but they are certainly quantifiable and scientifically justified benefits. Whether they're sufficient and whether there are alternatives that could increase the setbacks, that's something that has yet to be determined.
Well, Chuck, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Okay. Would you have an opinion as to whether the difference between a traditional system, septic system, and an IA system in terms of the reduction in nitrogen is that as big a benefit as moving the house back 20 or 25 feet? Environmentally, in terms of what this will do to the environment, to the cove?
I'm going to do a cop-out, Tom.
Well,
Not you might, but
right.
I'm going to do a sidestep, and I'm going to refer to 285-9D, which does look for an analysis of alternatives that would maximize the setback. So while those are beneficial items, I think the question is out there, and the applicant really needs to, I would say, strengthen their submission on indicating if reconfiguration of the sanitary system is possible. There may be ARB reasons that the house can't be moved, but that, that needs to be understood and either accepted or rejected by the Harbor Committee.
You mean the ZBA?
Well,
It was both. Both
Right.
boards weighed in on the moving of the house, so we're,
Right.
dealing
So-
with all three.
But
and
in
then
terms of like,
is the pool itself a feature that is causing the house to be closer to the wetlands than it otherwise could be?
right.
And finally, can the size of the house be reduced? I mean, those are all things that would have to be weighed to look at these alternatives to see if you're meeting the test of exhausting those practical alternatives. And again, the applicant has presented some information, but I think that they probably could strengthen some of that so that this committee has not only my opinion about the environmental benefits, which I can quantify. I can tell you how much nitrogen is being reduced, both by the lawn and the sanitary system. But we still have to meet the test for substandard setbacks under 285-9D.
Chick, you might have mentioned this, and I think my attention was diverted for a moment. What did we decide? We decided it last week. How close can a sanitary system be to a house again? Didn't we
I
discuss
believe it was
that?
10 feet.
And
I
10
think-
feet.
10
Yeah, I
feet.
verified that.
And that's what we're at.
Yes.
Something that there's been a lot of discussion about the landscape, scale and harmony vis-a-vis the architecture, the massing has not been discussed. Brian, I don't know if you can have this conversation with your client, but is it possible to look at reducing some of the massing? If you look at just the first floor plan, this is a very luxurious layout.
So, Mr. Sharp, to your point, we had that conversation with the Board of Historic Preservation and Architectural Review. So the massing of what you see from the street cannot be, because that's what they want to preserve as the streetscape.
Right.
And our addition that's put to the north has a lesser ridge height and is tucked in behind the east and west portions of the historic house. So we did spend a lot of time discussing the massing with the Architectural Review Board and the historic preservationist as to how we could do this harmoniously as to scale. So we're approximately 2,900 feet, which if you look back to the InterScience report that studied all of the houses in the village of Sag Harbor, puts us in the medium range.
Okay.
But we did consider that in terms of scale of the house, but the scale cannot be broken down on the streetscape, since that is the part of the historic house and streetscape fabric that the board, we needed to preserve to move forward with a project under their guidelines.
But conceptually, couldn't you, just to finish this quickly, couldn't you eliminate the western mass, put the swimming pool there and have a much smaller house, move the house further?
No,
why?
because the pool is outside of 75 feet. But if you also look on the eastern side, the line to the setback and the septic as far as we can go. So even if the pool was not there, the house doesn't go any further east. If the western portion was removed, the pool is then 50 feet from the edge of wetlands. So that we did do all of those factors, and I'm happy to provide that to the board. So, we did spend an extensive time in reviewing the layout and the design from both an ecological, an environmental, and a Board of Historic Preservation review, as well as keep it into de minimis variance reliefs. So those were all thought out, and we could provide that documentation. That was more for the Architectural Review Board in terms of historic fabric, but since you raised the question, we're happy to provide that. But all those scenarios were discussed and thought through prior to arriving at this design. So it wasn't a situation where we are asking for more and we thought the board would then negotiate with us down. We were very particular to ask for just what was required for this project to go forward, and that provided a maximum benefit for all the agencies involved.
Well, I don't know that the mass, it is a very big house. But my question too is, and I guess this is an ARB question, it's not one for you, but I've been to this site like 3 times. The houses across the street look like they're 1,500, 1,600 square feet. They're small little houses. The one that's further east it's a lot with a swimming pool in it. And the house there, I don't even remember what it looks like, but it's not very big. This is, I don't know, this is sort of an irrelevant footnote because that's not what we're discussing. But this house is like, in my mind, it's like really kind of out of character with what that little street is. Not my business, not my committee,
Correct.
but it just seems kind of bizarre. I like what you've got on the screen right now. That's very sweet.
That's the
It's a
proposed
lovely
house
illustration, right?
that was approved by the Architectural Review Board. That's the proposed house that you're reviewing.
I doubt you'll ever perceive it that way, but
Yeah, I doubt it.
it's a nice render. It's a very nice rendering.
Right.
Mary Ann, I'm going to have to interrupt at this time. I will have to leave the meeting. I will try and come back. You do have my input, and I will send the memo to the applicant. And
Well, let's take this last moment and ask the applicant if they have any questions before you leave, because I think we're going to probably just table this until January. And mostly based on what it is that you've already asked the applicant to provide.
I don't, I haven't seen Chick's memo of yesterday, so I know he'll forward that to me, as well as we can address additional questions. Just on your point, Marion, the houses across the street, actually, some of them have more than one house per lot. So we can provide that information as well if it's pertinent.
No, it's not, but that's unusual. Okay.
And Brian, I'd
Thank you.
be happy to speak with you about it. Most of it I did cover in my remarks tonight.
Okay, perfect.
As I said, I will tune out right now, but I'll hopefully be back.
Also, could we see the extension of the green line in the existing house? I see some parts of that green line.
Justin is drawing that now while he's on the screen, so we can formalize that and put it in two bright colors,
We'll
existing plus proposed, so that it's more clear.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right, so can I have a table to, can I have a motion to table this until the January 7th meeting, please?
I'll table that motion.
Who was first, who was second?
I may have been first. I'll take second though if
Right, motion was received by John Parker, second by Will, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have one more item here. This is new business. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing for 10 Vitale Silly Avenue?
I'll move.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Evening, members of the board. Brian DeSessa, attorney for the applicant. Well, the members that have been on the board saw this project last year. It received a Harbor Committee wetlands permit for approval for new construction.
Right.
The applicant has made two modifications to the project, so we filed a new application. Those two, and I'll pull up, if I could screen share here. So this is the plan you're looking at, is the plan that was approved and has a valid Harbor Committee wetlands permit for the construction of this house. We have since made modifications. The modifications are this proposed negative edge pool has been eliminated from the plan, and the house has shifted east to further. The board granted a setback for this drainage area, which was outside of 50 feet, but inside of 75 feet for drainage structures. The revised plan, which I now have up on the screen, eliminates the drainage structures between 50 and 75 feet, eliminates the pool area, has a lawn area with dry wells and drainage to contain any water from that area, and is shifted. So this line here, going to your previous point, the 75-foot line, everything, all proposed improvements, including drainage structures, lie outside of the 75 feet, and the pool has been eliminated. The landscape plan, the drainage plan, the sanitary plan, the variance granted by the village, the architectural review board plans have all been amended and approved for this modification. And I'm calling it a modification. It's a new application before this board based on the board procedures, but everything that you saw last remains the same, absent the elimination of the pool and the removal of drainage structures inside of 75, since we were able to shift east. Eliminating the pool and other hardened structures back here allowed us to reduce the additional drainage structures that were in that 50 to 75-foot area.
Terrific.
So that's what I have. I'm happy to answer any questions. I do see it more straightforward. There was a note or two that I needed to correct that I did speak with Mr. Voorhees about earlier today. I will have that submission into him. We provided him with test hole data, which was redone from the previous test hole, and the surveyor reversed numbers. So I will have that corrected, but it does still, everything works as it did previously.
Okay. Any comments from the Harbor Committee?
So they just programmatically eliminated the swimming pool.
We eliminated the swimming pool and we shifted the east, yes.
Yeah.
That's
It looks like
terrific.
on the water side, it's on a plinth of sorts. What is that retaining wall? It's
This is the same wall that was previously there that maintains all of our fill based on ground area
Yeah.
and elevation. So
Yeah.
that
What's
hasn't changed. Just the elimination of the pool and the shift are the differences.
What's the section change there, Brian? Just out of curiosity.
I'm sorry?
What's the steps that are going down? What's the section change between the lawn and the water in the area to the west, I guess?
The height?
Yeah.
I don't have that exact number. The wall is 4.5 feet in that part of the yard. So
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
plus or
That's-
minus that amount. And the wall required, which we just did for purpose of that, is mainly driven because of the depth of groundwater is low. So to provide separation for drainage and sanitary, we're bringing in fill and elevating.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions on the Harbor Committee?
Yes, Brian, just to clarify, the house is the same other than the changes that you've mentioned? In other words, the house isn't bigger or smaller than it was when we approved this last year?
That's correct. Well, when we eliminated the covered porch in some areas, but in terms of the volume, it's still the same as there. The roof coverage, everything else remained the same.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there anybody in the public here that would like to address this application?
I'm going to check the participants list. And
I don't see any hands.
I don't see any hands. That is correct, Marianne.
Okay. Can I have a motion then to close the public hearing?
There's no dock on this one, right? The dock is on the other.
There is a dock. The dock has remained unchanged. That's this pathway through there leads to the dock. That has remained unchanged.
Okay.
So actually, we have a little bit more buffer in this proposal than in the previous one that we approved.
So this area here where there were drainage structures covered by a mound of dirt and grass are now just buffer. So to that extent, yes.
Well, you certainly got the house in the 75-foot buffer, so that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay.
So easy. Seems so easy.
Right. Can I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
Make
I'll
that
move.
motion.
Thank you. Second it, please.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
So I think what we want to do is make a motion to direct Chick to draw up a permit for this application. May I have a motion?
I'll move.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. So
So-
we'll have, I'm sorry, we'll tabling this to the next meeting for a decision.
Right.
Thank you.
So we have, it's not on the agenda, but there is a discussion item. And I would like to have a spokesperson, please, for the Breakwater Yacht Club explain the situation that they hope to bring to us next month. But let's talk through it tonight.
Hello, good evening. I'm Chris DeSuno. I'm the architect and a member of Breakwater Yacht Club. We are proposing to work with the village of Sag Harbor to reduce one of the existing dock that's adjacent to between the current Breakwater Yacht Club and the sanitary plant, in order to allow better movement of the boats between our dock and the dinghy dock. So the whole proposal is really just to reduce the length of the existing dock that then has a bulb on the end of it.
Do you have a picture?
I do, if I can share screen.
Okay, I'm gonna allow Chris to share screen. Give me 1 minute, Chris. Okay.
Share. And so this is the lot. I'm sure you're all familiar with. This is the municipal parking lot. The sewage treatment plant is right here. This is the lawn where they have the farmers markets on the weekends. And then the Breakwater Yacht Club is right here. And as we come down, this is the yacht club, and there's this walkway in between the yacht club and the septic plant. There's a ramp that goes down right here to the floating dock that is for all of the dinghies for the Sag Harbor, for the mooring field. And then this dock is a fixed elevated dock with the hexagon at the end of it. And our proposal is to remove that hexagon and shorten this dock. So we have this out of the way. So currently, this is the existing dock. It's shaded. And it's 167 feet long. And our proposal is to reduce it to 26'2", which then would become this. So there's still be a lookout here. You can see out over the dinghies, but there's more maneuverability of boats in here.
Looks much safer.
Yeah, to have access from both the floating dinghy dock and the low floating breakwater dock. That's it in the entirety. It's really just a reduction of this facility. And our Commodore has gone to the village and proposed this to the village board, and they're in agreement. The benefit of this is that this current dock is currently is dilapidating, and some of the boards are failing. And as a part of the deal, we will reconstitute the boards that are necessary on here, saving the village some money in repair work.
Any questions for Chris?
So I assume there's pilings or some support structure that goes into the water, and you'll be removing all of those?
That's correct. So there are two sets of pilings, one for the floating dock and one for the fixed dock. And yes, our plan is to then remove all of those pilings and restore the seabed. So the project would require us to put a boom in place and protect the water from anything that's taken out as they remove the piles. And these are old creosote piles, so they're really not good for the environment to be there in the first place.
And there's some pilings that'll remain that are under that 26-foot stub?
Yes, there are. There are half a dozen that will still remain here. The village does still want this lookout piece for the public to be able to come down.
Okay.
So, we're not going to disturb them. We will be adding a railing across the end to match the railing on the sides.
Okay. Any other questions, any hesitations, any worries, concerns?
Well, I just have I have a general question, and this is basically for the board. I mean, the dock is a public access point. Now, I realize that because of its height, it's not actually, you know, used to moor boats or to you know, to dock boats to it. Although in theory that you know could have been done. But it certainly is a place where people go out and you know, look out over the water, and I think they have weddings every once in a while there or whatnot. And I just looking at that, I think that the Harbor Committee needs to consider the benefit to the public that there may be, as opposed to the detriment for those people who do, you know, use that dock to you know, to access the water view or to go out over the water. And I'm not taking a position one way or the other. I'm just saying, as I see that as something that we need to, you know, to consider.
I think when you come back, Chris, you can talk, don't you see this as enhancing recreation because there'll be the ability to have more boats docked there for rental and classes? I shouldn't be talking for you. You answer John Parker, please, Chris.
Sure. There's still access here, and as I was mentioning, you know, this the existing dock is elevated as opposed to the ones on either side that are floating docks that are a good, you know, 8 to 10 feet below this one. So seeing over these inflatables is quite easy. Our sailing center we're open to the public. People actually do rent the facility for weddings, and people come up and look out from our balcony or our deck all the time. And yeah, the photographs can still happen here on this one. I don't think at this time the village has any intention of putting any dinghies along here, but people can easily pull in their boat and load and offload on this side for the public, whereas they can't right now. This pier has dinghies on both sides all the way down, as well as this one and that one, and you can't access this pier from the water.
Let me ask you another question. What you just mentioned is that removing the mobile oil dock exposes a side of the dinghy dock, which is now obstructed by the mobile oil dock. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So there's a possibility of enhancing public access, possibly by being able to moor small boats for short periods of time to the east side of that dinghy dock. Would that be possible?
Yeah, it would be. There's you know, Breakwater uses this dock and up and down this side, and being able to turn around is our goal, to be frank about it. But yeah, we'll be able to get to either side of both docks at that point.
But in other words, your proposal doesn't exclude using the east side of the dinghy dock for, let's say, dinghies short term or other small boats.
No, it doesn't exclude it.
Well, the dinghy dock is the property of the village, so it's really a village question as to what they might want to permit or exclude from use on the east side of the dinghy dock.
Yeah, we'd have to take, I mean, that would be up to Bob Borey.
Well, it's not up to Bob Borey, it's up to the village board, but I'm just saying that I'm kind of arguing in your favor here.
Okay, yes.
Because what I'm saying is that we increase access to the public by taking down a structure which is preventing that side of the dinghy dock being used for public access.
I agree, yes.
And I also have to say, I think it'll be safer for everyone in general to have that dock gone, having gotten tangled up underneath the mobile dock in a sunfish before and some other hairy situations. It's better all around. I think it'll be more community oriented.
Okay. Any other comments from the Harbor Committee?
I think it looks good.
Yeah.
What's the permit process? Does DEC get involved in this at all?
DEC does not, oddly enough. It will just go through the village.
Great.
Yeah, it's similar to what went on with the construction of the docks next door at Sag Harbor Yacht Yard on this inner basin.
So do you have any other questions for us, Chris?
Not at the moment.
So you're aware of the timeline when you have to submit an application, it has to be reviewed by Chick, and then it has to come in enough time for Fred to write up a notice and be published in the paper. You don't have much time to get an application in, and I know you have like a certain schedule in order to get going for the spring and summer series. Right?
We did turn the application in. It wasn't turned in time for this meeting.
Okay, but you've already submitted an application?
That's correct.
Okay, good. All right.
Fred, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Fred, is there a consistency review issue under the LWRP?
Yeah, we'll have to make a coastal consistency. We always were with a permit like this. As I understand it too, not to complicate this tonight, but I think there's also the intent of expanding the lease between the village and Breakwater, right, Chris? Isn't that?
That's correct.
Part of it. So that would require coastal consistency too. So the answer to your question is yes.
But that doesn't impede us from.
No. That would be a finding we would make as part of the permit.
Right. Okay. All right. No questions from the board, no questions from the discussion leader there. I think we're good to go. Move on to the next item. Doris, Fred, sometime during the meeting today, people referenced it, and I don't know exactly to what degree it's been formalized, that we would really like, except in extreme cases, if people have outstanding items that they need to submit to us for us to continue our deliberations on an application, that they get those items to us by Friday at noon before the Harbor Committee meeting. How do we formalize that? How do we let people know? We always get this stuff coming in. Even today, like at 4:30 today, people were sending us stuff.
We could do a written policy adopted by resolution establishing that as the rule of the board, which obviously the board under, extraordinary circumstances always has the ability to waive. But I just think a written policy adopted by a resolution is all you really need to do.
Can you write something up for us?
Be glad to do it. Have it for you in January.
Fred, it's my recollection that we already did that. You weren't our attorney at the time.
If you did, it was before I was here, but I'll check with, check with Doris and see what we have on file, but but that would be the process. So
I think Denise did write something up.
We'll check and see, and maybe we just need to reiterate it.
I think we started it a couple of times and never got it over the threshold, but Fred, check on it.
We'll check and see if anything's been adopted thus far. One way or another, we can reiterate that policy. It's pretty much, the written policy is great. It's sticking to it. That's the hard part. So
I have no problem sticking to it, actually.
Well,
but I just like to have something documented so I'm not in any way being unfair.
Yep, understood. We'll check and see if anything's was ever adopted before. If so, we'll dig it up, and if not, we'll have a resolution for you in January.
Okay, great. All right. Will, do you want to give us a 2-second update on the dredging at Little Northwest Creek I asked you about today?
Yeah, well, I'm going to defer to Fred because he wrote an eloquent letter to Mike Payne et al. About the funding. Fred, do you mind doing that?
No, not at all. We've gotten the initial approval for the state funding for this project, which is in the neighborhood, I think, Will, as I recall, is that the budget for this is somewhere around $250,000.
Right.
I think that's what Drew Bennett came up with as an estimate. So, we've gotten the initial approval for the state funding. I'm probably, there's a state process that this now has to go through, which, will take several months. It's somewhat complicated by the fact that the governor's office has been extremely slow during the pandemic, and the state has roughly about an $8 billion shortfall. The grant is good. They just seem to be slow walking a lot of these projects. But my estimate on this would be that the funding and the funding for the project will be available sometime during 2021.
Can you explain the SAM, the state?
It's state and municipal capital grant program. It's a program that's part of the state budget that is for community projects, things just such as this. They're usually local projects, community projects. Some of the SAM money has gone to the firehouse. It's gone to the Bridgehampton Child Care Center for their project. So, it's state funding for local capital projects.
How would it compete, or could it compete with CPF funds? Could you use CPF funds for this?
That would be a decision for the town of East Hampton, because we're on the East Hampton side.
Right.
I guess it would, they'd have to consider it as under the water quality, the 20% for water quality.
Right.
If there was a demonstrated improvement in water quality, which is actually what this project is all about.
Well, I really appreciate your clarity, and I think there's a lot of there was a lot of confusion about where the dinero may come from, et cetera, and the SAM and versus CPF versus whatever other monies that are out there. It's always interesting, and I think that you did a great job of explaining.
Yeah, well, at the time, there was locally there was no budget for this project, so
Right.
We were able to find the state dollars. So that's how it's proceeding. And as I understand it, somebody can correct me, but I think it needs a permit from DEC, which I think has been issued.
Right.
But I think they're still waiting. I think the Army Corps has to issue a permit. I'm not sure that that's been issued yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's my understanding. If anybody has more up-to-date or better information, John, I know you've been close to this too, but that's my understanding, Will.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I haven't followed some of the details lately, but Fred, you weren't involved at the time, but we did initially, and Will was with me, present this as a possible project to the East Hampton CPF Water Quality Advisory Committee. And again, the question was, to what extent was the project purely a water quality improvement project?
Or as opposed to a beach nourishment project. With SAM, it doesn't matter. Either way, the funds are eligible, where the criteria are a little tighter for the Community Preservation Fund.
For whatever it counts, I think it's great to tap different sources of funding.
Mary Ann, do you know about SAM? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not, but I think it's great to have that, for capital type of projects.
I'm just thinking out loud, the John Germain Library project, some of the funding for that, that came from SAM, for example. That's a kind of community project.
How much do we usually get out here in the East End from SAM? Roughly a year. What do you think?
Well, there was, to get into the weeds a little bit on this, typically there would be $1 million to $1.5 million available, on the South Fork for something like this. 2020, there was no new money at all because of the pandemic. So actually the money for the Little Northwest Creek project was reprogrammed from 2019. There was another project that wasn't ready to move forward.
Yeah.
So we advanced this project in its place.
So Fred, one of the things that's been really very back burner is, this issue that comes up, I even hate to mention it, is whether or not we should have like some kind of culvert between the back of the coves and Noyak Bay. And we were talking to one of the senior people at the School of Marine and Atmospheric Studies, Larry Swanson, who unfortunately recently died. But he got a number of his people. We reached out to him because I really thought that this needed a thorough study of what was going to happen with the water. And was this going to totally reverse the flows? What was it going to do to the small little ins and outs of the coves? Was it going to create a super highway from the bridge to Noyak Bay and everything else would be sort of backwater? Anyway, he got a lot of minds thinking about it. But even before you got a thought of a shovel, it was going to be about a $75,000 study to really evaluate the tides and the currents, the flows of the water. Long story. Is that, Sam, is that only for like shovel-ready projects?
Yeah, it's for actual construction. As I recall, money for studies is not something
Okay.
that it can be used for.
Okay. All
What
right.
about CPF water quality projects? That seems like that would be something prime for that.
I'm sorry, what?
Hold on.
No, the
CPF for
CPF doesn't do studies, except the sewer study. They have a carve out for sewers for some reason. But like the water quality stuff that we do with Gobler that studies the quality of the water, CPF doesn't, that's outside of their purview.
Yeah, pure studies, no. Planning and design for an actual project is something that would be eligible. That's the distinction, Mary Ann, that you're really referring to.
Yeah, you can combine the study engineering and actually doing it, into one grant application and thus have some money for a study.
Yeah,
unless it's one of the specific
water
carve-outs.
quality monitoring, for instance, just a study that they can't do.
Yeah.
Do that, right. And I really wanted the study just to put an end to the discussion because I think it's a terrifically bad idea. And I'm tired.
I remember when this came up, I don't think you were alone in that regard, actually.
No, and I just want to beat it back into its hole and close the door.
Well,
So that's
is somebody else bringing it up at this point? Because actually, I
No.
thought you were pushing it, but
No, I'm definitely not. I would just like to, seal that door and get it away, but it hasn't come up lately. But
it's funny because I was just thinking of that, and when we were marching around looking for that pre-existing culvert. You don't think it would be good to put a culvert to get the water flow going for Upper Sag Harbor Cove?
no, I totally don't. And I'll take you offline on that and tell you in 100 million reasons why I don't think that's a good idea. But before anything happened, it would really need like some extensive study because I think this is something that is really open and vulnerable to unintended consequences.
I'll tell you what could be done in that location, Mary Ann, because you've dragged me over there to look for the culvert, et
Yeah,
cetera.
we found it.
You know,
that
you
day.
can tell that the drainage from the road goes into the cove. There are drains all along there, all along that, that Long Beach
Right.
road, which drains stormwater directly into the cove.
Well, the other thing it'll drain also in the wintertime is all the salt and all the chemical treatments that are put on that road to desalt it will go right into the cove.
Right. So I think that's a good question as to whether or not we need to, in some ways, take a look at that doesn't, well, it might in some ways solve some of the problem. But I think that people were looking at the question of like the algal blooms and the pathogens in the cove. And their answer to that was, well, let's just rip this huge culvert open to Noyak Bay and get it thoroughly flushed out. And I don't personally think that's a good idea, although it's kind of a gut feel, and that's why I wanted science. I think, though, you bring up a really interesting question as to if we can go to Suffolk County, and Bridget Fleming's office was involved in this, and somebody was looking, this is going back probably 2 years, they were trying to find the map of where all those drains go, where they are and where they go. Because I think that's really a good point, that they shouldn't be going into the coves. The coves are not flushed. So to be determined, anybody particularly want to take that one on?
Yes.
Okay, good. I
Yeah,
love it.
I'll give you a hand for that.
All right, we got
Also,
a project.
I want to segue into for projects is about when people have to revegetate and replant. Ages ago, we had talked about giving Tom a hand, and I could go by and visit a couple sites a year out after their the alleged replant.
Yeah.
And I'd really like to get that going because there's some time and I can see what's even in the dormant state that things are now.
So I think what we need is, I think we need some kind of spreadsheet so we can see these things coming up, and we have like sort of a tickler, if you will. And you can say like, oh, blah, blah on Howard Street or whatever, we did that like 2 years ago. What does that yard look like now?
Exactly.
But it's like out of sight, out of mind, you just sort of stay with the current agenda. So think about how we might be able to do that, because go ahead.
No, just the proposed tree clearing legislation.
Yeah.
Has that list of the replacement, and they're also, the village board is looking at the oversight of that. The replacement trees on lots that get cleared and what kind is there, and that's one of the outstanding issues in terms of making, presenting the whole clear cutting lot clearing legislation.
So we might be able to do something in parallel. I think this is a little different than, we've certainly, as you know, Kate, had issues where there's been lot clearing. But I think this is like, everything that's on our agenda. It's where they have buffer plans, and then, and I think we started saying that, landscapers had to, testify, swear to the fact that, these things are alive and well. And I just don't think we're really good at.
Oh, I see what you're saying. These, yes, the permits that have already passed.
For instance, like today, say Green Street with their 1,000 plants that are going to be put in on the bluff. Well, what's that going to look like a year from now? Right. Or some of the other, the very zealous planting plans.
Or Main Street, the whole thing, yeah.
All of it.
So logistically, could you just start from a year ago and pick a half a dozen projects, Mary Ann?
Well, I think, I don't know how you would pick a half a dozen. It seems like we need to go through all of them. And one of the things that was a problem is because, and Chick's not here. Eileen, maybe but I wouldn't expect you to.
Just pop back in.
Oh my God, is that time?
Timing is everything.
Timing is everything.
I'm listening.
So the question is whether or not we have anything really set up where we can, with some amount of rigor, be going to these properties that we've approved planting plans to see whether or not they're alive and well, and whether or not they're mowing them, whether or not they're fertilizing them, whether or not they've put other things in there where they're not supposed to be. Tell me where we are. We were supposed to have like the landscape architects testify to this a year after the plantings are completed. Do we do that?
Well, let me say first of all, at this point in time, and I've spoken about this before, Tom Priato, the building inspector, reviews sites for conformance with the various permits that have been issued. Right. Now, he's not an expert. He's not an arborist or a landscape architect or an ecologist. And he has called me in on certain projects to review them to determine if they conform with the permit conditions. But I'll say it's on a case-by-case basis when he feels he needs to do that. We also represent the village of Southampton, and we have a procedure for notification of the board that issues their wetlands approvals, and we verify them through a field inspection. But that procedure is not in place at this time in the village of Sag Harbor. We do have a provision as a condition of all permits, or at least all recent permits, for a survival rate for a 3-year period and replacement of those species that don't survive. So I think that's good. But we are relying on Tom to basically determine that there is let's just say a landscape restoration that looks consistent with the plan. So I think going forward, there's probably a couple of options. First, we wouldn't want to incur a lot of cost to the village. So, it could involve a committee member that feels comfortable doing spot checks. It could involve a report that we might require as a condition of approval for the landscape architect on record or ecologist to provide photographs and establish that the plantings have been installed and surviving as per the plan. And there is one particular project site. It was on Glover, and I can't remember the number, but that was a condition of an earlier approval. And we have received reports, and the landscape restoration has been effective, although it took a while because of deer browse. So that's another possible method. Or we could, go through and pull out the list and check each of those sites, whether it's a cost to the applicant or something that the village would pick up. And our office is certainly capable and qualified of doing that. And we also are in the village frequently flagging wetlands and inspecting properties. So you do have some options, any one of which could work or a combination thereof. And I just throw that out there for your discussion.
So it seems that, going back, like you said, Will, if we go back like 2 years, 1 year, we need to have a list of all these properties that have had approved planting plans. I think that's the first thing.
Certainly Doris has that, and we have very detailed records in our office as well. So a spreadsheet could easily be generated.
And we have the minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah, the minutes.
there'd be a lot of digging to get through the minutes.
Yeah.
And I actually cut it.
But I am happy to go through. I mean, I realize, the first year the plantings hang in there. The second year they're sort of just taking hold. And the third year they really zing into their own. So I just wanted to put, offer up checking on things.
Well, that's fine. And we appreciate that. And you have the expertise to do that. Jeff Peters used to do that. He would just like wig higgly piggly go check on some yard and come back with some horror story. But
Jeff was always calling me, I'll tell you that much.
If you'd like to be the Jeff Peters, that would be great. But I think we'd like to do it in somewhat of a systematic way. And
I agree.
I don't know if we need to, I've been lectured about not incurring more costs from our trusty consultants, Nelson Pope and Voorhees. So
absolutely. We wouldn't want that.
So I can't say, would you please do a spreadsheet for us? Who does, I know that I've, because I have something in front of the ZBA, there seems to be some kind of spreadsheet there because they could look up to see whether or not it was received or not. Doris, do you know, how is all this kept track of? How do we know when there have been permits issued? Is there a master list of all permits that have been issued?
No, we have all determinations, Harbor Committee decisions are filed. We have a folder kept in the building department. So you can easily access that file and go through all the decisions that have been approved. And decisions always check you very thorough with the conditions of approval. So that would be my opinion decisions.
This kind of goes back to what Bob Plum has been working to develop, which is a a sheet that accompanies all applications for building that is, it's a flow sheet. So you start here and you end up going to all these committees, or you do or do not. And Tom sees that they're checked off. And maybe as a part of that, at the tail end, there's a landscape sheet that says, 3 years in, this project passed or failed. And
Yeah,
that's,
but who's going to look at that? That's fine.
well, Lily and I have talked about that just in terms of conceptually, because we've had these discussions about, putting in 3-gallon plants versus 1 gallon, and then coming back in a year or 3 and checking it out. And if Lily and I can start it and look at it and drive around, and then maybe from that information, we say, whoa, this is overwhelming. We need a consultant, or we've come up with this matrix.
Or teach others, teach me, I'd be willing to learn.
Yeah.
So why don't you guys start with a little visit to Doris and get that folder and see how
Alright.
thick it is. See if it's like, I have no idea. What have we done? Have we done like maybe 20 decisions? 25, 30? What do we do? Maybe, I don't even know. Do we do 2?
How long?
I thought that was you.
It's all right. Now,
Yeah, we could go take a look at that and then start from there and say, whoa, there's 300 applications. That's just
Exactly.
too much.
Yeah,
Okay.
find out the magnitude of the problem. Let's start with
Yeah.
that. Okay. And then the last thing that I wanted to do, Fred, are you still there? You still awake?
Yes, I am.
I just
Still awake.
I just really wanted to thank you for this embellishment on the CPF statute, where we can extend that money to maritime industries or enterprises. I think that's terrific. You
Yeah,
look-
it really came out of a lot of meetings I've been involved with the seafood industry and commercial fishermen. And, it really just gives, we always talk about the traditional industries here of farming, fishing, and, the law had expressed provisions with regard to agriculture, but not with regard to maritime water dependent industries. So it was a good step in the right direction. Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it.
And
Yeah,
secondly,
much appreciated.
you're right, and a situation, an improvement close to my heart is we repaved the road to the golf course.
If someday when we're not so close to adjourning, I will give you the, I swear to God, it was easier to rebuild the World Trade Center than it was to get that road paved. So, but I'm very result oriented. It's done. So
Yeah, it's
Did the
done.
golf course pay for that? Who paid for that? Town?
The New York State Golf Course.
The New
yeah,
York State-
state owns the property. So the Parks Department.
And it was probably, I have traveled all over the world. I have a lot of experience with bad roads. And that was
Well, it was a
right-
bad road. I go down there.
Oh,
It was a
was
bad road.
terrible road. And it was like when there was a pothole on the left, there'd be a pothole on the right. It was,
No, it was very bad.
it
It was
was
the Front End Alignment Full Employment Act for service stations here, that road.
all right.
Speaking of roads, is there any comment on the projects on Bay Street, the pervious pavement and the?
They look great. They were
Are
just,
they gonna stay green?
they sprayed them white, the markers. Yeah, they're green and they just sprayed the
Dividers.
dividers. Looks great.
Yeah. And I'm part of this. I'm like the person who shows up for the meetings. It's the Peconic area. It's not
Estuary?
No, it's not the Peconic Estuary Partnership. It's the Peconic Estuary Protection Committee or whatever. Anyway, as a part of the dues, and it's not that we pay that many dues, we get a sign. And so I'm talking to Beth, and then through Beth, the mayor, whether or not it has to do with stormwater. That's really what this protection committee is all about, stormwater and MS4. So I thought, we've got a nice sign there at Havens for rain gardens. Maybe we should have a sign there that talks about the evils of stormwater and how these pervious pavers are helping us with our stormwater problem.
That's a great idea.
That's an excellent idea. Educate the public.
Oh, yeah, outreach. Okay, anybody else have any miscellaneous things in the next 2 seconds?
Good night.
Yeah, all right. Can I have a motion
Hungry.
to adjourn? Yeah, I'm starving.
Bye,
Motion
guys.
to-
I make a motion.
Adjourn.
Motion, I hear from Kate. Second, please.
Thank you all.
I'll
Wait.
second.
Second,
Thank you.
all right, all in favor.
Thank you,
Goodbye.
John.
Thank you, Eileen.
Good holidays, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Merry
Good
Christmas.
job.
Bye. Have a good
Guys.
night.
Bye.
Yeah,
Thank you,
happy
Doris.
holidays.
Thank you, Doris.
Bye, Kate.
Thanks,
Bye,
Doris.
Doris.
Happy holidays to
You too.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, John.
Good night.
Good night,